There are some truths too quiet to say out loud, and some mornings they sit beside you like an old friend who doesn't knock. They just arrive, breathless, certain. Today that truth is this: my daughter has my eyes, storm grey, a little too large for her face, always looking like they're about to ask a question too big for her age. She gets that from me. Maybe more than that. Maybe everything. She's 6 now, and when she stares at me across the breakfast table, milk dribbling down her chin, her hair a mess of cowlicks and sleep, I see it. Not just the resemblance. The innocence. I didn't have it that long, I think. Not really. The details of those early years are blurry now. A quilt of impressions and silence. A river. A shadow. A man whose back I remember better than his face. But she's still soft, still untouched in the way only children can be. There's no scar behind her smile yet, no twitch in her voice when she says, "Daddy, look, I made a cat, but it also might be a ghost." She holds up her drawing like it's the Sistine Chapel. A lopsided figure with triangle ears, stick legs, and a mouth too wide. It is indeed both cat and ghost, and it is perfect. That's amazing, I say, and mean it. She beams, and I feel the smallest shiver run up my spine, because I don't want to ruin her. I don't mean by yelling, or hitting, or disappearing. Those are obvious. But there are quieter ways to break a child, to pass down ghosts like heirlooms. A glance too sharp, a silence too long, a hug withheld because your own ribs are locked tight with fear. I've lived most of my life waiting for the other shoe to drop, and now, I'm the one holding it. I am the father now, and every day feels like walking a tightrope made of my own childhood. The photo of him is still in the drawer. I keep it there like a warning label. Once in a while, after she's asleep and the house falls quiet, I take it out, lay it on the kitchen table under the same overhead light that makes everything feel too real. I stare at it, not because I miss him, but because I want to understand the man who made me and then left me to remake myself without instructions. He had my eyes too, but his were empty. Sometimes I think the only inheritance he gave me was absence, but now I have her, and her eyes are full, curious, whole. She thinks I'm a superhero. She tells her friends I can lift the car if I really wanted to, that I can make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, that I can braid hair, that I never get scared. She's wrong, of course. I am terrified. Every day I wake up and check her room like a soldier patrolling a battlefield. I check the windows, the door, her breathing. I stand there and watch the rise and fall of her chest until I feel like I can breathe again too. I don't think that's normal. But then, what do I know of normal? I grew up watching a man vanish by degrees, first in presence, then in kindness, then in name. I used to think fathers were myths, stories other kids told. You could see the ones who had them. They walked like they had a map. I always felt like I was guessing. But she doesn't guess. She trusts. She calls for me when she's scared. She reaches for my hand when she crosses the street. She cries and knows I will come. Do you know how holy that feels? To be believed in like that. It breaks me. Not in the way he broke me, but in a way that unseals something ancient and brittle inside me. A boy who once stood by a river, waiting. A boy who thought maybe love was a thing that left footprints, but never returned. She calls me daddy like it's a given, like it's always been true, like it always will be. And I want to deserve that. So I stay, even when my mind tells me to run, even when the weight of generational silence presses on my chest, even when the mirror says, "You're not ready." I stay, because maybe staying is the first miracle. She climbs into my lap later that morning, unbothered by the toast crumbs on my shirt. She presses her forehead to mine and says, "You have sad eyes today. Want me to fix them?" I nod, swallow a lump the size of a decade. She kisses each eyelid. "There," she says, "all better." And maybe it is. Not because the past is gone, but because the future is still soft. And today that's enough. Maybe tomorrow I will cry in the shower. Maybe I will flinch when I hear a certain tone. Maybe I will doubt myself so deeply I forget what it feels like to be a good man. But not right now. Right now. I am holding her, and she is looking at me with my own eyes. But this time, they believe. It started the night I dreamt she fell. She was standing at the edge of something high. A building. A cliff. I couldn't tell. She turned to look at me, and the wind carried her voice away before I could hear her scream. I reached for her, but my legs wouldn't move. My throat wouldn't open, and she fell, slowly, quietly, like a leaf. I woke up gasping. I ran to her room, expecting to find her gone, but she was there, curled like a question mark, blanket half kicked off, thumb in her mouth, breathing. I sat down beside her door that night and didn't move until sunrise, and then I did it again the next night. And the next. It wasn't a choice really. It became like locking the front door, or checking the stove. My body wouldn't let me sleep unless I knew she was safe, unless I could hear her rustling in her sheets, unless I could be the thing that wasn't there for me. It's not normal. I know that. I haven't told anyone, not even her mother. She'd call it overprotective, maybe obsessive, and she wouldn't be wrong, but she also wouldn't understand. She doesn't know what it feels like to grow up wondering if the door will open or slam, if the car pulling up means danger or nothing at all, if your father's hands will hold you or hang in the air like a threat. She doesn't know what it means to fear becoming him. I do. Sometimes I sleep in the hallway, on a pillow from the couch. I've woken up with a crick in my neck, my back stiff, the cold of the hardwood pressed into my skin like penance, and still I stay, because every scream I've swallowed becomes a whisper I don't want her to ever hear. She asked me once, "Why do you always check on me at night?" I told her, "Because your dreams are important, and I want them to be safe." She said, "You're like a dream knight," and I laughed. I did, real, belly deep, because that word didn't belong to me, knight. It felt like a costume I was wearing, but in her eyes I wore it well. There are moments I hear my own father in the things I say, the cadence, the warning in my tone, the cold edge that creeps in when I'm too tired or too afraid, and when I hear it, I shut down. I walk away. I count to 10. I look at the photo in the drawer and remind myself, I am not here. But fear doesn't care about facts. It cares about blood, about echoes, and the loudest ones are the ones that sound like home. The door creaks, sometimes at night. Not loudly, just enough to make me sit up, heart pounding. I imagine his ghost standing there, not dead, not even regretful, just watching, waiting to be let back in through me. So I sleep outside her door, not because there's a monster under her bed, but because I'm still trying to prove I'm not one. There are nights I drift off to the sound of her breath, soft, rhythmic, like a metronome keeping time with something ancient and holy. I wonder if she knows how often she saves me. I think she does, in her own way, with her drawings, her giggles, the way she yells, "Daddy, race you," and always lets me win. Or maybe I let her win. Does it matter? She sleeps, soundly, and I sleep on the floor. And somewhere between the wood and the wall, I find a kind of peace I never thought I deserved. Some people inherit money, land, a legacy. I inherited a fear so large I had to build a ritual around it just to breathe. But here I am outside her door. And that's still inside the home I built. And that has to mean something. I didn't walk into therapy because I wanted to heal. I walked in because I was afraid I wouldn't. There was a moment of flash, really, when my daughter spilled juice on the rug, and I yelled, not screamed, not hit, just yelled, sharp, uncontrolled, and she flinched. It was small, barely a breath, but I saw it. The same flinch I used to give my father when his voice dropped. I saw my past echoing in her future, and I knew something had to break. So I sat on a couch in a room with a woman who didn't blink when I said, "I think there's something wrong with me." She said, "There's something hurting in you. That's not the same thing." And that's when I cried. Not because I believed her, but because I did. There's a kind of grief that doesn't come from loss, but from the fear that you'll be the one doing the damage next, that you're the storm now, not because you want to be, but because no one ever taught you how to weather one without becoming it. Each session was like detonating a mine I didn't remember planting. She asked questions like she was diffusing me, slow, careful. What was love like in your house growing up? What did you learn about anger? What's the first time you remember being afraid of someone who was supposed to protect you? I told her about the river, the silence, the photo with the ripped edge, the attic, the absence. She didn't flinch, she just nodded and said, "That sounds like a wound that never closed." I said, "It sounds like a childhood." She said, "Those are supposed to be different." I kept going back, week after week. I started looking at my life like it was a map I had walked blind. Every trigger became a breadcrumb, every panic a flare. I began to understand the architecture of my anger, the way it wasn't a fire but a pressure, built up, contained, until it wasn't. She asked me once, "When do you feel safest?" I said, "When she's asleep, when I know she's okay." She nodded. "And when do you feel the most afraid?" "When I see him in me." That was the first time I said it out loud. Him. My father, the ghost I spent years chasing, then years running from. He still showed up sometimes, in mirrors, in my posture, in my tone. But therapy taught me to speak to him, not as a son, as a witness, to say, I see you, I know what you did, and I'm not letting you speak through me. That took time, and pain. And every week, I walked out of that office, feeling like I'd left pieces of myself behind, but not like I was breaking, like I was shedding skin I no longer needed. She gave me homework once. Write a letter to your daughter, future tense, when she's grown, when she asks who you were before you healed. I wrote, Sweetheart, I was a man who loved you so much. I went to war with every part of myself that could have hurt you. I was a man learning to become gentle in a body that was taught to be cruel. I was a man terrified of his reflection, but I stayed. I learned. I asked for help, not because I was weak, but because I wanted you to know strength looks like softness too. And I hope, when you read this, you don't recognize the man I used to be. When I read it to my therapist, my hands were shaking. She said, that sounds like a father. I said, that sounds like a beginning. Healing isn't linear. It's not even clean. It's messy, loud, then quiet, then loud again. Some weeks I regress. I snap. I overthink. I wake up drenched in sweat, because the river dream came back. But I don't run, not from myself, not anymore, because every time I sit on that couch, I am choosing. Every time I open my mouth and tell the truth, I am breaking a chain. Every time I say, I am not okay but I want to be, I am diffusing a bomb, and that has to count. That has to matter, because this isn't just about me, it's about her eyes, and what I want them to see when they look back on who I was. It was a quiet death. In the dream there was no drama, no tears, no sirens, just a phone call, the kind that usually brings panic. But this time, there was only stillness, a flat voice on the other end telling me Jacob Mercer deceased. I said thank you, hung up, stared at the wall, and felt nothing. Not relief, not pain, not closure, just nothing. Like the moment held its breath, and forgot how to exhale. I woke up the same way, blank, blinking at the ceiling like it owed me an explanation. The light seeping through the blinds didn't change. The silence didn't lift. I rolled out of bed, walked down the hall, checked on her. She was still asleep, curled into a starfish across the bed, mouth open, dreaming something soft. I closed her door and sat in the hall. The tile was cold under my feet. I should have felt something. The man I spent decades chasing, hating, missing, grieving, the one who taught me absence before I could spell it. He died, and the well inside me stayed dry. That terrified me, because it meant the grief had hardened, that I had finally crossed a line between mourning and forgetting, and maybe that line doesn't lead back. At breakfast, I made pancakes. She asked for blueberries and whipped cream and a funny face on top. I gave her all three. You okay, Daddy? She asked. Yeah. Just tired. It wasn't a lie. Not really. But inside, I was standing at a grave that didn't exist, throwing dirt on a man who had already been gone so long that death felt redundant. Later that day, I found the photo again, the one from the attic, folded, weathered, too familiar. I stared at it like it might sprout a new truth, like the image would change if I looked long enough, but it didn't. There he was, shirtless, holding me, looking away. There I was, smiling like I knew something, like I hadn't been left yet. I realized something. Sitting there at the table, he was already dead when I was 5, not literally, emotionally, spiritually, as a presence, as a man who could be anything but a ghost. His physical death, that was just paperwork, a formality, a late entry in a story that ended years ago. I brought the photo outside and sat on the porch steps. The air smelled like dust and honeysuckle. I ripped the photo in half, then in half again, until it was confetti, and I let it go, not ceremoniously, not angrily, just opened my hand and let the wind take it. I didn't cry. That scared me too, because for a long time I believed emotions were proof, that the louder the ache, the more real the love. But what if that's not true? What if silence is the cleanest grief? What if the absence of feeling is its own kind of mourning? My therapist asked me that week, how did it make you feel? That dream, empty, I said, and ashamed for feeling that way. She nodded. Maybe that emptiness is a kind of peace, not the kind you celebrate, the kind you survive. I told her I didn't want to become numb. She said, you're not numb, you're unchained. I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't. All I know is that I've stopped listening for his voice in my own, stopped expecting him to knock, stopped arguing with the mirror, because now I know he doesn't live here anymore, and maybe, finally, neither do I.
It took 3 tries to get the training wheels off, not because she couldn't balance, but because I couldn't. I kept reaching for the handlebars, kept stepping in too early, kept hearing my father's voice in the back of my skull. Stop crying. You'll never learn anything with tears in your eyes. I heard it even though she wasn't crying. She was laughing, wobbling, falling. Yes, but laughing. And all I could think was, don't ruin it. Don't let your fear swallow her joy. The first time she tipped over, she scraped her knee. I rushed to her, heart pounding like a hammer in my throat. Are you okay? She looked up at me, blinking, and said, that was awesome. And I didn't know whether to cry or laugh, so I did both. She touched my cheek. Daddy, why are you leaking? I shook my head. Just proud of you, baby. But what I really meant was, I'm proud of me too, because I didn't yell. I didn't scold. I didn't say you're not trying hard enough, which is what I heard when I was 5, and 6, and 8, and forever. That day, in the park, under a sky smeared with clouds and sun, I made a decision. I would teach her without hurting her. That meant swallowing the instinct to control. That meant letting her fall without rushing in every time. That meant standing still and cheering instead of fixing. It was harder than it should have been. Not because she struggled, but because I did. I had to fight the muscle memory of fear, the reflex to shout, to correct, to say, let me do it. But I didn't. I stood there with my hands behind my back, bit my tongue until it stopped trying to speak in his voice, and she rode, wobbly at first, then surer, then fast. Wind in her curls, mouth wide open with joy. Daddy, look. And I looked, and I clapped, and I laughed so hard it felt like I was purging something. A demon maybe, a ghost, a man with my eyes and a mouth that knew only commands. When she finally skidded to a stop, breathless and beaming, she ran to me. Did you see? I did it. I really did it. I scooped her up and spun her around. You did it. I said, you did it all by yourself. And she said, not all by myself. You were there. That landed harder than I expected. You were there. That's it, isn't it? That's the whole difference. He wasn't, but I am.
That night I sat on the porch, her helmet still in my lap. I stared at the sunset like it owed me something. And maybe it did. Maybe it owed me proof that cycles could break, that fathers could teach without fear, that pain doesn't have to be the tool we pass down. I whispered, you see this? To no one, to the wind, to whatever ghost still lingered in my blood. This is how you teach a child. You let them fall, and then you show them how to rise. And maybe that's what healing is. Not the absence of pain, but the refusal to pass it on. I started writing letters I knew I'd never send. Late at night, after she was asleep, and the house was quiet enough to hear my own thoughts breathing, I'd sit at the kitchen table with an old notebook and write to a ghost who never earned my voice. Dear Dad, but sometimes I'd stop there. The word felt wrong, too familiar, too forgiving, like calling your executioner by his first name. Other nights the letters poured out of me, pages and pages of things I never got to say, questions with no answers, anger that had cooled to something sadder, regret like ash. I wrote about the photo from the attic, the sound of my own voice becoming his, the way my daughter looked at me like I was a lighthouse. I wrote about silence, how it isn't empty, how it echoes, how it builds a home inside you until you can't tell if it's keeping you safe or keeping you hostage. Some letters were just curses, others were apologies, not to him, but to the boy I used to be, the one who waited by the window, the one who checked every knock, every engine in the distance, hoping it was return wrapped in redemption. I told him I was sorry, for believing it was his fault, for carrying the absence like a badge, for trying to become a man without ever being a son. I wrote to my mother too. Dear Mom, I get it now. The silence, the tiredness, the way you flinched at kindness like it might break you. I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner. Sometimes the ink ran where tears hit, sometimes the pages stayed dry, but they always ended the same way. I folded them, walked outside, and let them go. Some I burned, some I buried in the backyard, near the rosebush you planted that always blooms too early. Some I just tore up and dropped into the wind, watching the pieces scatter like the fragments they were. She asked me once why I was outside so late. I said, just sending messages to the past. She nodded like that made sense. Maybe it did, because the past isn't gone. It lingers. It speaks in dreams and slips into your voice when you're not paying attention. It rides shotgun on quiet drives. It breathes down your neck when you're happy, whispering, "You don't deserve this." So I wrote back, over and over, "I do deserve this." That's the part I kept writing until I believed it. Not because it felt true, but because I wanted it to. And sometimes wanting is enough to make the truth begin. The wind never returned a letter, but it carried them. And that was all I needed, to know that some apologies don't need recipients. Just release. I used to avoid mirrors. It wasn't superstition, it was self-defense. There was a season of my life when I couldn't look at my own reflection without hearing his voice. Not literally, just the echo of him. The way my brow furrowed. The slump in my shoulders. The way my mouth would tighten when I said something I didn't mean but couldn't take back. There were his expressions. Borrowed, inherited. I would catch myself in the mirror and freeze, like he was standing behind my skin, waiting to speak. Therapy helped. My daughter helped more. But it was time that did the real work. Not time like people mean when they say it healed. Time like erosion. Like something slowly carving a new shape from old stone. Now when I look in the mirror I still see him. But I see me too. I see the man who made breakfast when he didn't want to get out of bed. The man who stayed when his chest screamed. The man who read books about parenting. Not because he wanted to be perfect but because he didn't want to guess. I see both of us. And that used to scare me. But now it just reminds me that I have a choice. He didn't. Or maybe he did and chose wrong every time. But I get to choose every day. Every second. Every moment when my temper flickers or my voice rises or my daughter looks at me with those storm gray eyes and asks, "Are you mad?" And I say, "No, baby. I'm just tired. And I love you." Because that's the difference. I speak the truth even when it's hard. I stay in the room. I breathe. I apologize. I broke a plate once. Just a dish. Slipped out of my hands. Shattered on the floor. And I said, "Shit." Loud and sharp. The kind of sharp that makes a child flinch. She flinched. I saw it. And everything in me cracked. I dropped to my knees and held her face in my hands. "I'm not mad at you. I'm sorry I scared you." And she nodded. Like she understood. Like it was okay. But I didn't move for a long time. Because that was the moment. The mirror moment. The one where I could have leaned into my own pain and let it spill out. The one where I could have deflected, blamed, withdrawn. But I didn't. I stayed. I softened. I healed. Piece by piece. Now when I shave in the morning, I study my face. The lines. The eyes, the tilt of my head. He's still there. Tucked into my jaw. The shape of my ears. The way my left eye crinkles first when I smile. But I'm there too. In the way I smile. In the way I keep coming back to the mirror. In the way I stopped running from my own reflection. It's not about erasing him. It's about layering myself on top. Building a new face from the ruins. A face that says, "I was born from silence but I learned to speak." A face that looks at my daughter and doesn't flinch. A face that can finally say, "I know who I am," and mean it. The first time Father's Day came around after she was born, I didn't know how to feel. She was too little to understand it. Her mother bought a tiny card, scribbled a note from her in crayon, and left it on my pillow. I stared at it for a long time. Not because it was touching, though it was, but because it felt like someone was talking to a version of me I hadn't met yet. It said, "To the best daddy in the world, love your little monster." I folded it, put it in a drawer, didn't look at it again for a year, because Father's Day had always been a wound, not a celebration. A reminder of what I didn't have, of who didn't show up, of the silence that waited at the mailbox when other kids handed out cards and hugs and pancake breakfasts. My desk at school stayed empty on the bring your dad days, and now I was the dad. It felt fake. Not because I didn't love her, I did fiercely, but because I still didn't know what it meant to be seen as something I never had. I called Uncle Henry that afternoon. "You ever celebrate Father's Day?" He laughed dry. "Nah." Felt like raising a glass to a ghost. "She made me a card." "Then you earned it." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the day still felt off, like wearing someone else's jacket. Too big. Too stiff. Smelling like memories that weren't mine. The next year she was older. She made me toast. Burnt on the edges. Scrambled eggs that were more like yellow soup. And she brought it to me in bed. Proud like she'd climbed Everest. "Happy Father's Day, Daddy."
You're my hero, and something cracked in me. Because how do you hold that kind of love when you were raised in its absence? How do you carry praise when your only blueprint for fatherhood was a door closing? I said thank you. I ate every bite. I hugged her so tight she squeaked. Then I went to the bathroom and cried into a towel, not out of sadness, but because I finally realized something. You don't need a card to be a father. You just need to stay, to answer the questions, to show up for the hard mornings, to say I'm sorry without excuses, to protect without control, to love without fear. I still don't like Father's Day. Not because it hurts anymore, but because part of me still aches for a card I never got to give. Some scars don't fade, but they stop bleeding. And every time she hands me a folded piece of construction paper with hearts and glitter and a stick figure that might be me, I let it heal something I didn't know was still broken. One card at a time. There are no blueprints for this kind of work. No how-to manual, no YouTube video, just instinct, sweat, and 100 tiny decisions made in the dark, hoping one of them doesn't burn the house down. I lost my temper last Thursday. She wouldn't put on her shoes. I was late for work. The cereal was on the floor, and the dog had just peed by the door. I raised my voice, not a yell, but sharp, stiff, a tone I'd promised I'd never use. Her face changed. Not scared. Worse, disappointed. And then she cried. And then I did. We both sat on the kitchen floor surrounded by Rice Krispies and shame. I pulled her into my lap and said, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be mean. She sniffled and said, it's okay. I still love you. But it wasn't okay. Because I'd felt something when I spoke to her that way. A flash of my father's voice passing through me like a bullet. And that was the moment I knew. This isn't a clean fight. This is blood under your fingernails. This is catching yourself mid-sentence and choosing silence instead. This is knowing that breaking the cycle means bleeding where you used to blame. It means telling your kid, it means walking into therapy and saying, I failed this week. It means calling your own mother and saying, how did you not lose your mind? And hearing her say, sometimes I did. But I came back. And that mattered. Some days I feel like I'm made of wire and glass, stretched thin. One wrong word from shattering. But I come back. I kiss her forehead. I clean up the cereal. I write the story down, so next time, I remember what not to do. Breaking the chain isn't glorious. It's not a single act of bravery. It's boring, repetitive, exhausting. It's putting the knife down mid-argument. It's unclenching your fists in the parking lot. It's choosing to walk away from the ghost of who you could become if you stop paying attention. It's not a moment. It's a lifetime. And yeah, it leaves your hands bloody. From digging deep, from clawing out the old habits. From holding yourself back when all you want is to feel in control. But I'll bleed for her. Gladly. Because every time I choose her peace over my pride, I win a small battle against the man who never made that choice for me. And those wins add up, one breath at a time. One soft tone. One I love you when I'm angry at a time. She hugged me before bed that night. And said, you're my favorite person. And I almost lost it again. Because it means the world. And it means the war is worth it. There are no blueprints for this kind of work. No how-to manual. No YouTube video, just instinct. Sweat and 100 tiny decisions made in the dark. Hoping one of them doesn't burn the house down. I lost my temper last Thursday. She wouldn't put on her shoes. I was late for work. The cereal was on the floor. And the dog had just peed by the door. I raised my voice. Not a yell. But sharp. Stiff. A tone I'd promised I'd never use. Her face changed. Not scared. Worse. Disappointed. And then she cried. And then I did. We both sat on the kitchen floor, surrounded by Rice Krispies and shame. I pulled her into my lap and said, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be mean. She sniffled and said, it's okay. I still love you. But it wasn't okay. Because I'd felt something when I spoke to her that way, a flash of my father's voice passing through me like a bullet. And that was the moment I knew this isn't a clean fight. This is blood under your fingernails. This is catching yourself mid-sentence and choosing silence instead. This is knowing that breaking the cycle means bleeding where you used to blame. It means telling your kid, you're right. It means walking into therapy and saying I failed this week. It means calling your own mother and saying, "How did you not lose your mind?" And hearing her say, "Sometimes I did, but I came back." And that mattered. Some days I feel like I'm made of wire and glass, stretched thin, one wrong word from shattering. But I come back. I kiss her forehead. I clean up the series. I write the story down so next time I remember what not to do. Breaking the chain isn't glorious. It's not a single act of bravery. It's boring, repetitive, exhausting. It's putting the knife down mid-argument. It's unclenching your fists in the parking lot. It's choosing to walk away from the ghost of who you could become if you stop paying attention. It's not a moment. It's a lifetime. And yet, it leaves your hands bloody, from digging deep, from clawing out the old habits, from holding yourself back when all you want is to feel in control. But I'll bleed for her, gladly, because every time I choose her peace over my pride, I win a small battle against the man who never made that choice for me. And those wins add up. One breath at a time, one soft tone, one "I love you when I'm angry" at a time. She hugged me before bed that night and said, "You're my favorite person." And I almost lost it again, because it means the world, and it means the war is worth it.